It was late on a Friday night when the office floor was unusually silent, the kind of silence that presses against your chest and makes you second-guess every footstep echoing through the wide corridors, and I found myself nervously adjusting my blazer as I walked toward my boss's office after receiving an unexpected call from him, a call that came just as I was about to shut down my computer and head home. And though the timing had caught me off guard, something in the tone of his voice, gentle but firm, made me realize this wasn't about work reports or deadlines. It was about something deeper, something unspoken that lingered between us for months, and as I reached his door, the gold letters of his nameplate gleamed faintly under the dim lights, reminding me of the authority he held. Yet when I raised my hand to knock, my pulse quickened in a way that had nothing to do with fear of reprimand, but rather with a quiet anticipation of finally confronting emotions we had both buried beneath professionalism. And when his voice from inside said, "Come in," I stepped into a space that was familiar, yet suddenly felt different, warmer, more intimate, as though the air itself carried the weight of what he was about to say. And there he was, leaning against his desk in a crisp white shirt with his sleeves rolled to his elbows, his usually stern face softened by something I had never quite seen before, hesitation, perhaps even vulnerability. And for a moment we just stood there, neither of us speaking, both aware that silence was speaking louder than words, and I wondered if he, like me, had been replaying every lingering glance across meetings, every accidental brush of hands when passing documents, every unspoken moment of connection that lived between us in the quiet spaces of our day-to-day. And when he finally said my name, softly, almost as though he was afraid it might shatter the fragile atmosphere between us, my breath caught because I had never heard my name sound quite like that, and he began to explain that the reason he asked me to stay wasn't because of unfinished tasks or late-night reports, but because he needed to tell me something he could no longer keep to himself, something that had been resting heavily on his heart. And as his words unfolded, he confessed that what started as admiration for my dedication and creativity had slowly turned into something more, something he tried to ignore for the sake of boundaries, something he fought to suppress every time we shared a laugh or exchanged thoughts beyond spreadsheets and numbers. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't deny that I had become more than just an employee to him. I had become the person who brightened his mornings, who lingered in his thoughts long after office hours, and that realization scared him as much as it made him feel alive again. And as he spoke, my own memories surfaced. The subtle smiles we shared in crowded rooms, the way his encouragement always felt personal, the way I found myself working harder not just for the company, but because I wanted to see that look of pride in his eyes. And though I had tried to convince myself that my feelings were misplaced, that they were nothing more than fleeting admiration, hearing him confess made me realize that what I felt wasn't shallow or one-sided. It was something real, something that had been waiting for acknowledgement. And in that moment, standing there with the quiet hum of the city outside, the tall glass windows, we both let down walls we had spent too long building, and our conversations stretched into hours, not about numbers, not about office strategies, but about life, about dreams, about fears we had never shared with anyone else. And the more we spoke, the more I realized that the boss I admired wasn't just a man of authority, but a man with his own vulnerabilities, a man who carried burdens behind his strong facade. And as dawn slowly approached, painting the office with hues of pale orange, it felt as though the entire night had been a confession, not just of feelings, but of souls recognizing each other. And though nothing physical ever happened between us, because it didn't need to, the emotional intimacy of that night was more powerful than any embrace, because it was built on honesty, respect, and the courage to acknowledge something fragile and rare. And when I finally left his office that morning, walking out into a city, just waking up, I knew my life had shifted in a quiet but permanent way, because I carried with me not just the memory of words exchanged, but the knowledge that love can sometimes find us in the most unexpected places, in the silence of an office after hours, in the voice of someone who sees us beyond titles and roles. And even though challenges lay ahead, even though society and circumstances would question and test what we discovered that night, I also knew that conversations like that don't happen often. They etch themselves into the heart, And that is why, to this day, I call it the conversation that still haunts me, not because it was painful, but because it was so profound, so transformative, that it lives with me like a gentle echo, reminding me that the night my boss called me and wasn't just another late night at work. It was the beginning of understanding love in its most honest, unguarded form.